Well, good morning, everybody. My name is David Fricker, the President of the ICA. It's my great pleasure to see you all here. May I first commence the proceedings of this morning by inviting all of you to be upstanding as we welcome to the conference His Excellency, the Honourable Hieu van Ley AC, Governor of South Australia. Please rise. Thank you, Your Excellency. As we play the Vice-Regal salute. And please remain upstanding for a moment. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you, Your Excellency, for being here. And we'll be hearing from His Excellency in just one moment. Of course, we're meeting today on Kaurna lands, and it's our great pleasure now to welcome to the podium Kaurna Elder Michael O'Brien. Could we please welcome Elder Michael? Thank you.
Tuwela Manibudnik, Tuwela Wakanapadnik, Daladadlo, Kamaka, Yarakumanindi, Nina Mani. Nina Mani is the words of hello of the Kaurna people, and your response would hopefully be Mani I being good, or Mani Yaka if you're not so good. So, Nina Mani? Nei Chaya. So, Nai Ghana, Burka Mankalankla, Marawachunga Ghana Mina, Nai Nari Kamatbi Maricha, Nai Wangadi Mani Budni, Gani Yatana, here in Diata, Tandendanga, Tandawama, Karawirapara, Gadiyata. Welcome to the lands of the Kaurna people, or the Meena people, or the Adelaide Plains people. Today, you sit upon the land of the Kangaroo Plains, being Adelaide Oval. And behind me is known as the Red Gum Forest River, or Torrens River. And further to the north, we have the place called the Emu Place. And Adelaide is known as Tandendanga, being the dreaming place of the big red kangaroo. And the cloak that I wear is the cloak of that kangaroo. But what's really unique about Adelaide itself is the centre of Adelaide is Victoria Square. Well, it's actually not a square. It's actually the shape of the Kaurna shield, which is this shield here. So we have these three wonderful elements, being the shield, the emu, and the kangaroo. And there's a bit of a theme here, because where do we see those three elements? We actually see them on our national emblem, don't we, or crest. And so South Australia was known as Bambamambaya, being the conference centre of our nations, First Nations people. And so all our First Nations people would come to Adelaide to celebrate and to share in corroboree, or to knowledge or artefacts, or all of those wonderful things of our people sharing, which is really important, and which is why you've really come today, is to share in this wisdom and knowledge. And so a welcome isn't just saying, are you well, when you come to a place, like the words tell us. It is saying hello. But more importantly, it's asking you, where have you been and what are you doing? Because your face tells you where you've been, but your heart tells you where to go. And so a welcome was really important. And so today I want to share a little bit of history. Those particularly from South Australia would hopefully know this information. But South Australia was a unique place. Why? Because we don't have convicts that settled this place. We were a free colony. Now, I want to take you back, and it's wonderful to have the governor here today because I'm going to show you one of the governor's flags, which people don't know. And if you get the opportunity to go to the beautiful home of the governor, you'll see this image a little bit better than the way I've drawn this image, but you'll see this image in his beautiful ballroom on his stained glass window. But there was a special image because this is a flag that the governor had back in 1876 to 1904. And the image here is not only just of the Union Jack, but you'll see something very interesting in the middle. There's actually two people. One was an Aboriginal person. The second person is a person of Britannia. Now, what's interesting is that the Aboriginal person is sitting on a rock throne. The person from Britannia is reaching out to be welcomed by the Aboriginal person. But what's even more interesting is there is a kangaroo carved in the rock above the Aboriginal person's head. And as we know, Adelaide is known as the kangaroo place. So it's an interesting flag. But it goes even further because it was actually the common seal of South Australia. So all the legal documents that South Australia had in those early days were stamped with that particular seal. And so even the Constitution of South Australia has that common seal on it. Now, just to help you, because I'm sure you know this, but the Union Jack is made up of three nations, being St. Patrick, St. George and St. Andrew, which I'm sure you know is Northern Ireland, Scotland and England. Now, and I'm sure you also know that it was 1836 that South Australia was formed, and we know that because our basketball team, the Adelaide 36ers, is called the 36ers for that very reason. Now, you also would know the king of the day, because that's the main street of Adelaide, being King William Street, and you would know the queen of the day because the city is known as Adelaide, therefore it was Queen Adelaide. But there was a governor, the first governor, he wore a bit of a funny hat. He wore a hat a bit like this. His name was Governor Highmarsh. Now, he set up his home in Highmarsh there, and which was a significant place for the Aboriginal people because it was a place known as the place of the high or the chest. And even the Christian people knew that it was a very important place because many churches will be found in that particular area. But what's even more important is that obviously two key gentlemen, being Matthew Flinders, who mapped out all of Australia and particularly South Australia and named Australia to give its name of the Great Southern Land. But also we had another gentleman, Colonel Light, who really mapped out Adelaide, and he did that in an interesting way. Some people say the land spoke to him. Some people say that Mullawilla Burka, the last of the Aboriginal people, spoke to him, as well as the fact he himself was a clever man, because he not only put Adelaide in the north, south, west, east directions and put the green belts in, but he actually designed the Adelaide city itself in the shape of the kangaroo, and North Adelaide in the shape of the emu. And as I said earlier, Victoria Square being the shield, which is really amazing. And so Colonel Light, he was an interesting character. But as we know, being a free colony, not a convict colony, people came, and how did they come? Well, they came in boats, didn't they? Just like these ones. Now, what's even further interesting is when people came, they like to, mark their territory, and they did that by putting their flags upon the nation. But when they came to particularly South Australia and Australia in itself, because our people have been welcoming people to this nation for thousands of years, and one of the things that we've never said is go home. That's because you don't leave. No, it's not true. It's because you will never see me at the end of a conference. I'm always at the beginning, so I can't say goodbye. But largely, we don't actually have a word for goodbye. We have a word for see you later, which is very interesting, and I will say those words. But the flag that they found when they came to this nation was a different flag. It was this flag. The flag of the Aboriginal people, being the red being the earth, the black being the people, and the yellow, not just the sun, the giver of life and hope, but really you. Because when we extend our hand out, we can say, Nina Mani, being welcome, because that's what our people have always done, is welcome people to this nation, whether it be the English, whether it be the French, or whether it be the Chinese, or whether it be the Dutch as well. And so it's an interesting place. Our people believe strongly that when you walk this land, it will connect with you, and therefore it is your home. And that's what a welcome does, because the spirit people of my ancestors have been called upon here today to bless you, to bring that goodness, to send away that badness, but to remind you that when it is your home, we look after it. And if you look after it, it will look after you. And that's very important to understand. And so as you can see, history, our people were always about coming together. And it was demonstrated by that king. It was demonstrated in his letter, the king's letter being the letters patent. And he wrote those words. He wanted the land to be owned and occupied and shared by the Aboriginal people. But sadly, because he died 6 months after writing the king's letter, that was lost. And sadly, that letter never reached the shores of South Australia until 1904, which was after Federation. I myself was never an Australian citizen until the 27th of May of 1967. What's interesting, I see that you're using an app called Nexus, and in that particular period, Nexus was known to be the campaign. What many people don't know is that Aboriginal people did get counted in the census and therefore becoming Australian citizens in 1967. But the second part of that referendum was they wanted to increase the number of House of Representatives, which got a no vote. But really, when you think about it, it got a yes vote. Why? Because if you increase the number of population, you increase the number of senators and House of Representatives anyway. So in actual fact, it was a success for the government anyway. Maybe not for the Aboriginal people. But I've gone on far too long. And so therefore, I hope today and the rest of this conference is about knowledge, it's about truth, it's about sharing, and it's about voices, because that's what this year of NAIDOC was all about. But I want to leave these words, which is Myonjiga, Nachi Yukandaya, Nachi Yakandaya, Padnia Duwadu, which is saying we can walk, we can sit, but please observe, please listen to the land. When you do those things, it brings cultures together. It gives us the ability not only to be brothers and sisters, but to walk and sit upon that in harmony and to do it together. And that's what this is all about. It's about doing things together. So as I said earlier, Nakata, see you later, and Nechaya, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that very gracious and generous welcome to country, and may I say informative and quite entertaining as well. And we have a project to go and find that seal. So Jeff James, we might be coming your way to have a see if we can find it again. But we won't steal it, we'll leave it back. Look, it is now my great pleasure to introduce His Excellency, the Honourable Hieu van Ley, AC, Governor of South Australia, to come to the stage to officially open the conference. Would you please join me in welcoming His Excellency the Governor? Thank you, Governor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your warm welcome. Welcome to Adelaide on this beautiful spring day. Let me first start by acknowledging Ms. Julia Mant, Mr. David Fricker, Ms. Amela Silipa, and all the dignitaries and leaders within this organization, all the conference delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're gathering here this morning, the Kaurna people, and we respect their spiritual relationship with their land. I also thank Mikio for his gracious welcome to the country. We are enriched that we share our land with Aboriginal people, the world's longest continuous civilization and living culture. To all our guests from interstate and internationally, let me note that here in Adelaide, all 29 of our parklands and squares of our wonderful city have been given Kaurna names in acknowledgement of their original custodianship. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be here this morning to officially open the Designing the Archive Conference. Adelaide is proud to host the international conference in the year that our state records celebrates its centenary as the oldest government archive in Australia. To our international and interstate guests, a warm welcome to Adelaide and to South Australia. Welcome to the City of Churches and the Festival State, and consistently rank among the top 10 most livable city in the world for many, many, many years. Here we are always pleased to showcase our heritage, our glorious scenery, and our abundance of superb food and wines, of course. I also welcome you to the state that was forged in tradition, progressed, and reformed. As you heard from Uncle Mick O'Brien, the settlers here come to South Australia as a free settlers, unlike many other states whose settlers were the convicts. But the settlers who arrived in South Australia in 1836 had a mission to establish a great society built upon the principles of enlightened reform. The very streets of our city where we stroll every day are living archives and preserve the names of social reformers such as the Edward Gibbon Wakefield, Robert Gucher, and George Grote, and names of many, many eminent members of the reform clubs in Britain at the time who actually designed the legislation to establish South Australia as a free colony back in the 1800s. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as many of you may know, this year South Australia celebrates our major historical milestone, the 125th anniversary of women's suffrage. We were the first jurisdiction in Australia and one of the first in the world to grant universal suffrage alongside the right to stand for Parliament. One of the symbols of the passion and the fortitude of the suffragists was a petition containing 11,600 signatures. The original copy of the petition is kept in the basement of our Parliament House, but the work by our archivists has enabled the documents to be much more accessible to the public. State Records of South Australia and History Trust of South Australia have together created an index to the names and places in the petition. It is accessible online, and people can search their family name to discover their connection with this watershed document. You can see a map and witness the myriad of towns and places across the state and even interstate where people got behind this groundbreaking reform. Similarly, there is important work occurring at the South Australian Museum, making family genealogies accessible for Aboriginal people using data from university expedition of the 1930s. These archives can help family researchers and assist Aboriginal people to link up with family and community. Ladies and gentlemen, these, among many other possible examples, show that archives play an important role in preserving our stories and our collective memories. They are a reminder of the passions and foresights of those who have gone before, that they were no less wise than we. Through the work of archivists, these records of the past remind us of the aspiration and ideals that shaped our communities and our society. They remind us that some important work needs to continue. So, ladies and gentlemen, your important work preserves the past as a vital source to provide signposts to our future. I wish you all well for a productive and stimulating conference where you share expertise, spark new ideas, and forge new friendships. It gives me a great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to officially declare the conference open. Have a wonderful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those words to open this conference. You've inspired us to redouble our efforts in the next few days to cover as many topics and explore as many themes as possible. His Excellency now has to leave and attend to another appointment. Could you please join me in thanking him for his presence here this morning as he departs. Thank you again, Your Excellency, very much. Well, welcome once again to the ICA Iran's Parbika ACA Annual Conference. Look, I'm going to talk to you this morning as primarily in my capacity as President of the ICA, and can I just commence by saying it is such a pleasure again to be convening an annual conference of the ICA in partnership with our Australian and New Zealand branches here, of course, professional associations. Can I also once again acknowledge the Kaurna people upon whose lands this city has been built, and thank you again, Uncle Michael, for that very, very gracious welcome to country. And I think in receiving that welcome to country, I should let all of our visitors know we're sort of undertaking a commitment to behave ourselves while we're here. Michael told us if you look after the land looks after you, and we will certainly do that while we're here on your country. And so thank you very much once again for that welcome. And if anyone plays up, I'll hear about it and I'll report back to you. There you go. Look, this conference is really the premier international event for our profession. This is the opportunity for us to gather from all corners of the world and share knowledge, insights, contribute to each other's thinking, and to develop that professional intelligence that I keep talking about that enables us to go back to our daily lives with a much richer understanding of what we're doing and where we're going with the work that we do. Many people at these events always come up to me and say, being an archivist is such a lonely job. You know, so many of us work in very small teams or in the corner of a university, a library or whatever, and from day to day it can feel like we're the only ones dealing with these very big issues. Events like this really nourish us and really motivate us for doing the work that we need to do. And this conference, I think, sets a new tone for our discussion as a professional community. You know, in past events, we've spent quite a bit investing our efforts in looking at digital archiving, about the application of new technologies, about better ways of description, about better methods of providing access, etc. But this theme, and I really do congratulate Julia, Eric, Peter, the concept of this designing the archives really takes us, the archivist, out of the picture, and it puts people in the middle of the picture. It's a user-centred way of thinking about what we do and why. Who are the people that visit archives? Who are the people that create records that are archived with us? What do they want? What are their expectations of us? Because that's changing. Here in Australia, everywhere around the world, community expectations are changing in many, many ways. Their attitudes towards democracy are changing. People's idea of what a democracy is now quite different. People's understanding of what government is, what government is supposed to be doing. People's understanding about the handling of public information by government, by big data corporations, they are evolving very rapidly. But I think unique to our age, they're evolving not in a consistent, homogenous way. They're evolving in unpredictable and various ways. Communities' expectations are actually becoming more fragmented. People are becoming more individualistic. People have a very personal relationship with their past, with us as archivists. We're dealing with issues of human rights, of course, but we're finding in order to protect someone's human rights, it's not as simple as keeping their records safe. Some people regard their records as their identity. I think all of us regard the records, the memory of who they are, as representing their identity. We have a very personal relationship with our identity. Some people would rather we destroy the records about their past because that does not reflect who they are. Some people would like us to alter the records of their past because they have themselves changed over their identity, over life. They don't want their birth certificate to read like that anymore because that's not the person they are today. As I say, sometimes we need to keep things secret, sometimes we need to keep things public, and in between, there are all sorts of different ways. We have to release records to communities, but sensitive to the cultural requirements of that community. So these are all sort of attitudes and things that we're thinking about today during the course of this conference, which are far more sophisticated and nuanced, I think, in the traditional view that many people have about archives. You keep records, 20 years later, you make them public. Well, no, that's not it anymore. It's very, very different now. And I think one thing, though, that I'm very emphatic about is one thing that's consistent here is that we do need to keep records because as society evolves, I was very interested reading Laura Miller's book, and I know Laura is here with us, but many people would be familiar with Laura's work where she's really analysing what is truth. And I think what I take away from these discussions is that truth is whatever you think it is today. But what matters is the evidence upon which that truth can be made. So our archives have to keep the evidence so that the next generation can arrive at their own version of the truth. And what separates us from other memory institutions is that we're not, therefore, keeping records because we want to remember some good things, and we're not keeping records because we're ashamed of some bad things. We're actually just keeping records because we want to remember. We want to faithfully be able to re-observe the past and make fresh observations. Because society is changing so quickly, we don't know what we're going to discover. We can look at a record again and we'll discover something completely new. And I do think one thing I've learned in my time working within archives is quite counterintuitive, is that I think the past is just as unpredictable as the future. You know, this idea that hindsight is 20/20 vision doesn't work anymore. Every time we look backwards, we discover something quite new. So the past is unpredictable, maybe even more unpredictable than the future. And so that's why this conference and this theme, I think, is so very important. And that's why I'm encouraging all of us here gathered now to really challenge ourselves, to rethink what we're doing, put people at the centre of what we do. We should be prepared to rethink, to challenge ourselves, to upend the traditional values that we operate on, to make sure that what we are doing is making the collective memory of humanity at the very best possible service to the people that make up all of the societies that we serve. So with that, I'll conclude. I will simply say that we also need this opportunity of these conferences to enjoy and update ourselves. We have a wonderful set of exhibitors' stands at this conference. I do encourage all of you to visit those stands, have conversations with those people. I acknowledge our major sponsor, Ancestry, and I encourage you also to meet and have conversations about what they might be able to do to help us in our mission. And I do thank our sponsors for their continuing support for these events. It simply isn't possible to do it without them. So with that, I'll conclude by saying welcome to you all. Michael, I'm from Canberra, which is the land of the Ngunnawal people. In the Ngunnawal language, it's Gurubari for welcome, Wurugawuri for thank you. So I say thank you to you, and I say Gurubari, welcome to all of the people here. So with that, I'll conclude and wish you all the very best for this conference. Thank you. I'll hand over to you. I left my running sheet over there, so I've forgotten. Thank you, Julia.
Right down, there we go. Hello, welcome. My name's Julia Mant. I'm the President of the Australian Society of Archivists, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here. I suddenly realised as I sat there looking at the lovely spring day, dangers of wearing glasses that are automatically change colour. If I look like I'm wearing my sunglasses, I'm not. I'm just trying to see. So apologies if they change colour and I look like that. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien, for a very generous welcome. I too would like to acknowledge the Kaurna people on whose land we stand, and also the generosity of spirit that exemplifies so many of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, as we really have learnt so much, and how critical the archives are for our First Nations. I'd also like to pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here in the room, and also to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to extend that welcome to First Nations visitors from across the world who are here today. There are many from all over the world, really, so I welcome you here, and I hope it'll be a wonderful week. We actually have people from 76 different countries here. We've got 138 speakers and 58 sessions, so it's an absolute smorgasbord of intellectual debate and challenging engagement and conversation to be had. We're here in Adelaide. Now, I'm from Sydney, actually. I'm not from Adelaide. But I lived here in Adelaide in the 1970s, and those years for me were quite halcyon days. I often look back on them with a lot of nostalgia as I roamed wild on my bike through the wide streets. And those years in Adelaide, well, we would go to the theatre, we would go to the festival centre. I would beg to go to the Gelato Bar in Hindley Street, the seedier end as it is now, I think. But the point about that time in Adelaide was that it was a real cultural change, and it was that change was led by, I guess the word would be flamboyant, Premier of the day, Don Dunstan. And he really had a vision for developing a cultural economy here. And rather than a main road through the centre of Adelaide, he actually encouraged what is now, what we were able to enjoy last night, that hub of government buildings that are in the centre, that are all together, and developed the festival centre, which so dominates the Adelaide culture here, and is very much part of Australian culture as well. And he also, I guess, the food and wine that is so emblematic of Adelaide was all really emerged in those 1970s. So, in actual fact, Adelaide is the perfect place to hold a conference. The reason we're here, though, is that we were going to be in Adelaide, and we held ASA conferences every year across different states. We even hold them in New Zealand at times with our Kiwi cousins, as we call them, very successful ones. And so this year was going to be the ASA Iran's conference, when I got that now infamous phone call from David to say, could the ICA come along? And I said, sure, that'd be fantastic, because actually it's a wonderful thing for our members to be able to extend those conversations. For the ASA is actually made up not of predominantly government archives, but in actual fact members from across a wide range of sectors, including schools, universities, churches, religious institutions, private organisations, and so that annual exchange of ideas and connections is really quite critical. And if we can extend that with our international partners, obviously Australia hosted the ICA Congress in Brisbane in 2012, but it's such a unique event. Parbika then said, could we come along for the party? And of course, it was even more wonderful to have our Pacific cousins, so I welcome our delegates from those nations too. We do have people from all over the world, so it's wonderful. So here we are in Adelaide. But the thing, now Tony mentioned it being a long time between drinks in Adelaide, and this is true. We won't go into the reasons. But I do want to note that Adelaide 2003 conference was not just about here for the ASA conference, not just glam, but it's actually the G. Adelaide put the G into glam. It was the first real use of it, and I think because we were last night in the gallery and you could see how much a part of that was that historic memory of South Australia, it made sense. And so now, of course, glam is universal and used all over the place, but in actual fact, its inception was here in Adelaide. So I always say a little bit of glamour never goes astray, and people have really grabbed onto it as a concept. So I do want to acknowledge the Iran's president, Eric Boomer. He was not able to be with us today, but Tina Jordan, the Iran's Tehewinga Mahara secretary, is here as well, so welcome, Tina. And Opeta Elefeo from Parbico was not able to come at the last moment, but Amela Salipa is here, so welcome to them both, of course, joining David and myself as host. Now, the other thing I want to note about ASA conferences is that they're very much a time for perhaps really engagement, robust conversations, thought-provoking ideas. There is a conference code of conduct. It is, you can read it through the app, and I do want to just maybe encourage you to have a read through that and take some time to reflect. Now, on to our sponsors. So we have one major partner and one major sponsor, and I do want to acknowledge the National Archives of Australia for their major partnership. It is not possible to hold these events without that investment, and the NAA has been a solid supporter of ASA conferences over many years, and there is a good number of NAA delegates here, but I am assured that the office is still functioning across Australia, so it's not everybody, is it? But it's pretty much all the key people, yeah? Yeah, well. So thank you to the National Archives and to David. The other major sponsor is Ancestry, and we've been very fortunate at the ASA to have the support of Ancestry for many years as our principal sponsor, and I'm very pleased that they were able to join here today and take on a major sponsorship role. Now, I'm going to introduce, I'll just get my words up here. We've got some few words from Ancestry, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Quinton Atkinson, who has worked the last 22 years in the content department at Ancestry. He's currently the Senior Director of Global Content Acquisition and Partner Development. Quinton has spent a number of years working in the international arena for Ancestry, where he's travelled to many countries, and you indeed may know him well, including the United Kingdom, Ireland, France, Germany, Italy, Australia, Mexico, Spain, South Africa and China, and he's worked there with local and national archives. He works out of the Ancestry headquarters in the United States, and it's my great pleasure to welcome him today to give the sponsors address. If you could please make him welcome, Quinton.
Thank you very much. I have one primary objective this morning in the few minutes that I have, and that objective is to not detract from the wonderful welcome and spirit that we've already begun to feel. I'm from South Africa originally, and what I've learned in the few days I've been here, and really in the few years that I've been associated with Australia, it's not lost on me that greater recognition needs to be given for the original people that exist on land. There have been movement all over the world, and as I travel the world, I think there's a lot that can be learned from what is happening in Australia. I'm sure it's been happening for a while, but I think other countries in the world can take a lesson from the acknowledgement that is being given to those whose land we occupy now. So that's my primary objective, is not to detract from that. As I've attended a couple of receptions over the last few evenings, I've had a few people come up in the nicest possible way, come up and say, what are you doing here? Why is Ancestry here, and why do you attend this event? And as I've tried to stumble through answering that question, I was reflecting last night on the art gallery of South Australia that we attended. It was great for me to go down into the basement and to look at all of the artwork, but the place that I got captivated was in the little video room. I got stuck there for about half an hour, 45 minutes. And the reason I got stuck there was because it was there that I learned about the artists. These little few-minute vignettes of the artists talking about what they're doing and how they came about the artwork that they produced. And the common theme that I saw was two things. One is they wanted to learn themselves, and two, they wanted others to remember. So to learn and remember, and each of them seemed to be creating artwork for the purpose of learning and remembering their culture. And as I think about Ancestry's purpose in associating with you in the archive space, maybe you can think of Ancestry as a bit of an art gallery. We aren't the ones that created the art. It's not our story to tell. There are stories that can be told from the records that you have, from the documents that you keep. And part of what we feel and what we try to do is to share that information so that others, as broadly as possible, can learn and can remember. So that's why we're here. We're here to support the industry that helps people learn and remember their past. I had two videos I was going to share, and I've been debating up until this last minute which to share. And after David's words, I know which one I want to share. But before I do that, just quickly, this is who Ancestry is as a company. We are a family history company, the largest in the world in online family history, with over 3.5 million people using our services. And we're also a DNA company, where we are helping people through DNA discover more about where they come from and who they are. So that's who we are as a company, and over the last year, these are some of the countries and the national institutions that we have signed contracts with in order to help digitize and index records so that, again, we can broaden the learning and the sharing of culture. But not only do we work with archives for the purpose of adding content to our platform, we also have projects where we want to reach out to the community and provide more philanthropic work. So I just wanted to share with you one example of that philanthropic work, where over the past year we've spent almost $1 million to help digitize the largest Holocaust collection in the world. This is an archive that was previously known as ITS, the International Tracing Service, set up after World War II by all of the Allied forces in an attempt to gather records so that people could trace their ancestors or their family who they lost track of. For many decades, 5-6 decades, these records were kept under lock and key. And through a partnership, we were able to help them bring those records online. And so with the last few minutes I have, I just wanted to share a quick video with you that illustrates the importance of the records that you have, the remembrance they can bring, and the importance that they hold for people today.
For many, many people who disappeared, who were killed by the Nazis, there is nothing. There is no grave, there is absolutely no inscription whatsoever, except for a line, a birth date sometimes, and a name. These documents, it's a testimony, it's a witness to what happened. The Arisen Archives hold 30 million documents. It's the largest worldwide archive on the persecution by the Nazis and on the survivors after the war. We had the intention to publish large collections online, and we didn't have the resources. So we were very privileged to find an excellent partner with Ancestry.
The partnership essentially involves the archives digitizing the millions of paper documents that they have, and Ancestry creating searchable indexes, and people everywhere can search the records for free.
7.5 years ago, I found a list from Auschwitz with my mother's signature on it. It was a list of 227 names that came from the Arisen Archive in Germany. What you can see at the front is Auschwitz, November 29th, 1944. It's a list of women prisoners. This is my mother's name. This is the number that was on her arm. This is her signature. And what's most compelling to me are the signatures, each different, each representing their personality. What I've been doing since then is going through name by name, trying to determine what happened to these girls, what's their story, where'd they come from, did they survive? I felt compelled to go to Arlington to see if I could learn anything more, both about girls on the list as well as family members. This was a girl, 15 years old. As I was growing up, my mother told me if I would have an extra piece of bread, I would give it to Margitka. And if you had a gift of bread, that means you get to live another day.
It is more important than ever to show what can happen if these values about solidarity, about equality, about respect are not upheld.
Living memory is dying for those that were involved in the Holocaust. We need to capture that information so that even when they are gone, experiences that they went through can be preserved and shared for future generations.
What is this? That's my grandfather as well. It's extraordinary to see his actual signature and that he touched this card.
It is a privilege for us to contribute because of people like Alan, who are researching their relatives but also other victims of the Nazis, because we contribute to the fact that they will not be forgotten.
Let's see. This would be a picture of my mother in Germany. I have the ability to do this sort of research. I have the time. Many people don't. For those who can't go where the sources are stored, the ability to look at it online is extraordinary. And it's a wonderful thing that Ancestry is making it available for free to anyone who wants to see. The reason I'm doing this is not so much to pass this to my children, but to their great-great-great-great-grandchildren. Because one day when they wake up and say, who am I? What am I going through here? And when they look back and they see what happened with their great-great-great-grandmother and her resilience, I want them to take that lesson.
So I recognize that not everyone's archives hold content as heavy as maybe what the Holocaust is, but you know as well as I do that the records that you hold are important to those that are doing the research, those whose ancestors and whose names and whose information is held in those records. So that's why we're here. We're here to support you, we're here to have fun with you, and appreciate being part of your organization, your community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Quentin and Ancestry, for that presentation. And what we thought it might be good to do, given the theme of this conference is a very strong theme around First Nations and First Nations archives, identity, dealing with the past, and reconciliation. Following the presentations that we've had this morning, the address from His Excellency, the opening words from myself, from Julia, and now from our sponsor Ancestry, we thought it might be good, Elder Michael O'Brien, you've very graciously given us your welcome, and you've very graciously given us your time to spend some time with us and learn a little bit about what we're doing and the journey that archivists are on, in particular in terms of reconciliation with First Nations peoples. And so on that note, in recognition of that, I wonder if I could invite you to the stage again, and I want to present you with the Universal Declaration on Archives, which is a statement endorsed by UNESCO, which commits all of us to the use of archives for memory of the past, rediscovery of identity, and really linking people together. So could you join me in welcoming again Michael O'Brien to the stage, and as I present the Universal Declaration of Archives to you. Thank you so much. We've got a photo over there. Right, hold the universal. That's great.
Thank you, David, for that wonderful gesture and for everybody. David, don't go anywhere because I have something for you. Our people, in some ways, have always seen, as I said earlier, the land being the oldest thing and all the knowledge and wisdom is held in the land. And so, therefore, we've told, I suppose, our stories, and we've collected all of our information, whether it be in the words we say, the dances or the songs, or even the art that we produce. And today I want to exchange with you that spirit of giving and receiving. So I'm asking you to take a gum leaf from this branches here. Yep, just the leaf, not the branch. Now you're taking more than knowledge. But, and so I'm going to do the same, and I give you this leaf, and I'll take your leaf, because in doing this, I want to say those words that I sort of said at the beginning, which was Nada Nadlu Kamanka Yara Kumanindi, which means today we can give and we can receive, but together we become one. What is really important to understand is the leaf is connected to the land by the tree. The tree is has that knowledge and wisdom of this land, and so therefore the knowledge and wisdom is not only come through the leaf, but when we talk about ancestry and what part of one of the things that they said was your DNA, my DNA has been put upon that leaf, therefore we've shared our knowledge because no one person holds all that knowledge. And so it's a great reminder of sharing knowledge, the symbol and the connections that we make by understanding not just only our culture, but all cultures, and those connections that we can continue to make. So I thank you for this particular wonderful gift and recognising the wonderful work that archives people do around the world. And again, I say nakara and nechaya. Thank you.